Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. And in this video, we're going to be discussing about a question from the past papers, that is November 2020, paper 23. Um, so basically, I'm not going to be doing the entire question. We're just going to be solving part D, but that's an important question. It was tested in 2020. It can again be tested in 2022 because they didn't ask a question on inflation or deflation, I suppose, in 2021. I mean, not entirely for an 8 marker. So it's a discussed question. Okay, so remember that whenever you will have your past paper questions, they will give you some opening paragraph, right? It will be a small case mentioned above. Either the 8 mark question can be linked to that case or it may not be linked to that case. It depends upon the student. How is he able to link it? Sometimes they ask it from the case itself, or sometimes it's just a direct question unrelated to the case. Now it's an 8 mark question. It says that discuss whether or not deflation will benefit an economy. Now, first of all, before I teach you how to attempt this question, remember that remember that. So this question is just basically talking you, or this question is basically focusing on deflation. So the students will generally write everything what they know on deflation. Now this is the wrong strategy. You're not supposed to write everything that you know on deflation, but you need to write only that portion, or you need to mold your knowledge in accordance with how the question is asking you to do. So it's saying, first of all, discuss whether or not. So discuss question really basically involves evaluation. You need to critique the narratives, and you need to tell whether the inflation benefits or not benefits, right? So discuss whether or not deflation will benefit an economy. So basically, the question is asking you to evaluate or argue with the examiner that whether it will benefit an economy or it will not benefit an economy. So first and foremost, remember that the first approach in how to write an answer is is that you will define what deflation is, and you will say that deflation is a continuous. You'll write the definition, and then you'll say that it's a continuous fall, it's a continuous decline, it's a persistent decline in the general price level. And you will also say that it's basically negative inflation, right? So this is just the definition, and you will try to make sure that you end it in one line, right? And then you'll say that a deflation is usually recessionary, okay? Is usually recessionary, and the extent of the deflation will depend upon the extent of the, or you can say, yeah, so the extent of the deflation will depend upon the extent of the recession. At times deflation can be short-lived, at times it will be long-lived. If it's long-lived, the recession will be worse. The recession will be, much harmful than as compared to a small or a mere recessionary effect. Remember, I've taught you in the previous videos as well that a recession has to be sort of distinguished between recession and a recessionary effect. A mere recessionary effect occurs due to a negative demand shock when AD just falls, and then a recession is indicating that your AD is continuously falling for 6 months or 2 consecutive quarters. So the effects are the same, but then the extent of the effect, or the extent of the negative effect, actually matters in both the cases. So now the question obviously says that whether an deflation or whether the deflation will benefit an economy. So you will say whether the deflation will actually benefit an economy or not benefit an economy depends upon the kind of reset, the kind of deflation, right? It depends upon, first of all, the kind of deflation, right? So if it's good deflation, it is obviously beneficial for the economy. If it's bad deflation, obviously it's not beneficial for the economy, right? So the kind of deflation is what determines whether the deflation will be beneficial or not. And then you'll go on by saying that what is good deflation. You'll say, good deflation occurs in when your short-run aggregate supply, shifts to the right. So basically, and then you'll say, and then you'll give the factors that can actually cause your short-run aggregate supply shifting to the right, so that you can actually. So it's not necessary that you give all the factors in detail, but just 2-3 factors that will cause good deflation. But remember that since it's short-run aggregate supply shifting to the right, so we know that shifts to the right with decline, falling trade union pressure, because of falling raw material commodity prices, or maybe because of a temporary increase in cost, temporary decline in the cost of production, maybe due to temporary increase in efficiency, right? Or a short-term increase in efficiency, maybe due to subsidies. But the point here is that although yes, it's a good deflation, but you will call this a deflationary impact or a deflationary effect. You can't really call it a good deflation that is sustainable, right? Because this is good deflation we're talking about. We need to make sure that this good deflation is sustainable, and a sustainable good deflation would only occur when your LRAS will actually shift to the right. That is long run aggregate supply, because guys, this is just short run aggregate supply. So when your short run aggregate supply shifts to the right, it is known as a positive supply shock. And remember that positive supply shocks are basically short lived, guys. They're short lived. They are just temporary. So you can't really rely on the government or the state cannot really rely on positive supply shocks to actually benefit the economies. Hence, we state that they are not sustainable. So that you can't sustain these shocks. You can't. So, for example, if the government is giving subsidies to key industries or large industries, which has a ripple effect on all the other industries in the economy, and that causes the cost of production for the entire economy to go down. So, but then the government will continue. Till what period will the government continue to give subsidies? Obviously, it can't continue to give subsidies for a long period of time, right? Hence, in that case, we say that it's a mere deflationary effect. But then again, whether it's a mere deflationary effect or not, it still has positive consequences. First of all, the level is falling. Second of all, the real GDP is rising. So the positive impacts would be that your employment will go up, right? More jobs will be created, which will obviously increase your living standards. This will cause firms to grow as well, firms to expand as well, increasing their profits. When their profits will rise, they might end up reinvesting the money in research and development. That will have positive consequences in terms of economic growth and sustainable employment in the long run. Number four, obviously, it's going to increase tax revenues for the government as well, since more money from corporate taxes, more money from income taxes will be generated, since employment is rising as well, which will increase incomes, hence more money from corporate and income taxes. More money from taxes means more money will be spent by the government on infrastructure development, on capital investment, on dams, roads, bridges, and maybe welfare payments, right? And that money being spent on welfare payments reduces the gap between the rich and the poor, and it creates a redistribution of income, and that reduces the income inequality, right? So there are a lot of benefits that occur due to good deflation. Now, these are the short-term benefits, right? Now, obviously, these benefits will occur in the economy, but they are short-lived. They will not be long-lived. They won't be really sustainable. So if you want to talk about good deflation that is more sustainable, in that sense, you need to actually shift your long run aggregate supply curve to the right. So for instance, if this is the economy and the economy is already at full employment level of output at YFE, and this is your aggregate demand and this is your aggregate supply. So basically, and if the what happens is that your long run aggregate supply shifts outwards because of various factors. We'll discuss that. I'm going to be erasing this. And so if your long run aggregate supply shifts outwards, and this would cause an increase in your real GDP from YFE to Y1, right? And you can clearly see that your GDP is going up, your real GDP is rising. Your real GDP goes up, your national income goes up, right? And your living standards would go up. But the best thing about this diagram and this diagram, the difference is that when your LRAS, that is your long run aggregate supply, shifts outward, it results into potential growth. And remember that potential growth is sustainable, because potential growth means economic growth that is long term, long lived, and obviously it won't occur in the short run, it occurs in the long run. And this could also correspond by an outward shift in your macroeconomic PPC when your PPC shifts outward. So you'll make this diagram, tell the examiner that PPC will shift outwards. Hence, good deflation will benefit the economy, because a good deflation that arises due to a shift in the long run aggregates. And you can see good deflation occurring, because this was the initial equilibrium at P1, and now this is the new equilibrium. So price level goes down, inflation goes down. So yes, these advantages will happen in this diagram as well, but then this will be more long-lived and more sustainable. And by the way, by an outward shift, so yes, it will benefit the economy over the long run as well, and not only increasing our potential or the capacity of the economy as it is corresponding with an outward shift in PPC. So it will also basically, and then it will also increase employment. It will. So if, by the way, this decline in inflation is basically a decline in cost push inflation, right? So it is a decline in cost push inflation. And you would also tell why will LRAS shift to the right, such as maybe because of infrastructure development, maybe because of investment in education, investment in healthcare, maybe because the productive efficiency of the entire economy is going up. So all of these factors will shift your LRAS to the right. And remember that LRAS for an economy always shifts to the right when there is an increase in the quality and the quantity of resources, that is of factors of production. And LRAS also shifts to the right when the productive efficiency of the economy goes down. So obviously, if that's the case, if all of this is happening, then yes, deflation is beneficial. And whether or not deflation is beneficial or not, see, I've mentioned all the points that in what case deflation will be beneficial. Then you will mention, however, not all deflation, however, not all deflation is beneficial or advantageous, or you can say not all deflation brings, benefits with itself, or, because such as when you talk about bad deflation, deflation, and you will say that it depends upon the cause of inflation. So guys, I've also drawn a PPC, and I'm going to be telling you that whenever your long run aggregate supply shifts to the right, it could be represented by an outward shift in your production possibility curve. So remember that a shift in your long run aggregate supply means that your productive capacity is increasing, and it results into a rise in productive potential. And a rise in productive potential means that it could correspond by an outward shift of macro PPC. So this is basically your macroeconomic PPC, not your micro PPC. And a macro PPC is represented by writing capital goods on the X, consumer goods on the y-axis, since these are the only type of goods that are produced in the economy. So basically, good deflation that is more sustainable occurs whenever the long run aggregate supply shifts outwards, and that is shown by an outward shift of your PPC curve as well. It is, and that kind of growth is more sustainable over the long run because it enhances your potential. So yes, the economies benefit over the long run and result into more sustainable outcomes for the future, and for the present as well. So the reasons why your long run aggregate supply might shift outwards, or you can say the reasons why good deflation could increase because of a shift in LRAS, is because of a rise in infrastructure investment by the state, or a rise in investment in education by the state or the private sector, or a rise in investment in healthcare, or basically, so these are the reasons why your LRAS shifts outwards, or your LRAS could also shift outwards because of a rise. And the main reason is that your long run aggregate supply increases is because there's an increase in the quality and the quantity of factors of production, and there's a decline in productive efficiency. So you could mention all these points. Obviously, you won't end up mentioning all the points that I've mentioned here in your exam, but even if you can mention 75% of these points, you will get good marks. So then you'll move on to say, since it's a discuss question, you will say, however, not all deflation bring benefits. It depends upon the cause of deflation, right? It depends upon the cause of deflation that will help us determine whether deflation is harmful or not. So it depends upon the cause of deflation. So for example, if deflation is caused by a continuous decline in aggregate demand, which is obviously an indication that the economy has hit a recession, then such a deflation is not beneficial. So although price level is falling, but that fall in price level is not benefiting anyone, because it's not helping increase consumer spending, it's not helping increase government spending, not helping increase exports, not helping increase your investment. So basically, such a deflation is bad for the economy. So if, let's suppose, this is your aggregate demand curve shifts to the left, to the outwards, this is indicating that this is your price level is falling, but that's not helping the economy do anything, because obviously your overall demand has shifted to the left. So if your demand shifts to the left, it means that there is a recession that is going on in the economy. But we are assuming here that this decline in aggregate demand has happened, for a continuous period of 2 quarters. It's not just a mere recessionary effect, but an actual recession has hit the economy. But remember, the more severe the recession, the more severe the deflation would be. The worse the recession, the worse the deflation. The worse the deflation, the worse the negative consequences. So in this case, the first negative consequence would be that unemployment would go up, which is obviously demand deficit unemployment. Your cyclical unemployment would go up, right? It would result into profits for the business continuously falling. Some businesses may shut down, and the more unemployment rises, the more businesses shut down, the more the burden on the government to provide for unemployment benefits and transfer payments, which means the more the government would end up into a budget deficit. And to finance that deficit, the government would need to borrow, which means that it would result into rise in national debt. They might borrow domestically or internationally. Uh, so sales are falling, profits are going down, unemployment is going up, your national income is going down, your real GDP is going down, your living standards are obviously falling, your poverty levels will obviously rise. So these are all the negative advantages that may help because of deflation. So we shouldn't be misguided by the fact that just because prices are falling or things are getting cheaper, it is an indication that the economy will grow and people will start buying goods. No, it's not the case, because in a recession, people don't have incomes, and they might not buy goods and services, because overall the consumer, remember that in a recession the consumer confidence really goes down, so consumers don't end up spending money. The reason is that they have very low confidence, they need to save more. Savings increase, spending falls. So and also business confidence also goes down, firms confidence levels also go down, they don't invest. So since investment is going down, so AD starts declining. And because they fear that what will they do if their investment is not recovered, so they don't invest huge sums. In fact, their level of investments fall, right? So these are the reasons why a recession can be harmful for the economy, or why deflation is not always good for the country, why deflation is bad for the country, right? So for a past question, for an 8-mark past paper question that says discuss whether or not deflation will benefit an economy. So you have to mention what is deflation, and you have to mention when will deflation be beneficial and when will it not be beneficial. Right now, conclusions are not required for your O-level exams or IGCSE exams. But if you give a conclusion, just to impress the examiner, then there's nothing wrong in it, right? So basically, there's also one more problem that occurs in a deflation, that deflation results, like I said, that deflation results into an overall decline in consumer and business confidence. So people start delaying purchases, right? This is another reason why. So when people start delaying purchases, because consumers at times in a recession, they expect, and this usually happens at the start of a recession. So when recession starts, people are not really sure that why is the recession coming. So prices starts to fall. And when this happens, people start delaying purchases because of an expectation that prices will decline further in future. So because of this expectation that prices will decline further in future, they delay the spending. And because of this delayed spending, what happens is that consumer expenditure starts to fall further. And when C starts to further, AD further falls, which brings the economy into a further state of a recession, right? So you could say that it, leads the economy into some sort of a recessionary spiral. The economy goes into a recessionary spiral where recession keeps on growing itself and magnifying itself. Okay, so I hope you so these are the points that you need to mention. So it really depends upon the cause of deflation, whether your AD is what are the reasons why your AD is falling, what are the reasons why um, what are the reasons for deflation, whether it is a good deflation or a bad deflation. So this will determine whether deflation will benefit the economy or be harmful for the country, right? Also, it depends upon whether your country is a developed country or a developing economy. Even if you're, let's say, if you're a developed country, and even if you're having bad deflation in your country, but you're a developed country, your central bank, your state bank will have more reserves and more funds, and your government will have more money to bring the economy out of deflation or a recession, as compared to a developing or a poor country whose state might already be on a huge levels of debt and will lack the funds required to bring the country out of a recession, right? So again, they may resort to borrowing. So again, if you mention these points, you will definitely end up getting good marks. So this is how you need to attempt an answer. It should be structured. Whatever points that you are writing, they should be explained. Don't just write the points, explain them as well. If you're drawing a diagram, make sure that the diagram is explained. So for example, if you draw a diagram, you should say, the above diagram shows that, the below diagram shows that. Also remember that conclusion and evaluation is not the same thing. I mean, conclusion, you can say conclusion is the last part of evaluation. Evaluation is a judgment or the last part of evaluation is a judgment or a conclusion. So evaluation means critiquing the narrative. The narrative says deflation is harmful. This is the narrative. That is what people think. Just like they think that recessions are harmful, that is a narrative. Deflation is harmful. That's a narrative. But you critique it by saying no, it's not harmful if it's good deflation or it's caused by a rise in aggregate supply, be it short run or long run, right? And the um, last part of evaluation is to actually structure your answer in a way you conclude your answer. You conclude your essay by giving a conclusion. Although conclusions are not required in O levels, but if you give them, you know how to give them, it will definitely have an impression on the person who's checking your paper. So guys, that's it for this video. I'll see you all around in the next video. Until then, take care.